Hi, I'm Anika Juhn, an energy data analyst with the Institute for Energy Economics and Financial Analysis, or IEEFA. This webinar highlights the findings in our recently released analysis of Air Products' planned Louisiana Clean Energy Complex blue hydrogen/blue ammonia project. The study provides an illustrative example of the failure of CCS to reduce emissions in hydrogen production from fossil fuels, as well as the potentially staggering cost to taxpayers of funding such ventures through subsidies. I'm presenting work here that David Schlissel and I started last year. Many of you have probably worked with or heard of David over the years. He was a founding member of IEEFA and retired in January. The work I'll be discussing leverages the research we did on blue hydrogen a couple of years ago and focuses on a planned facility under development in Louisiana. It's Air Products' Louisiana Clean Energy Complex. I'll refer to it in this presentation as the LCEC. This is Air Products' large blue hydrogen, blue ammonia facility that's a greenfield project under development in Burnside, Louisiana. Far from being climate sparing or even neutral, this project will likely generate millions of tons of new greenhouse gas emissions every year. This will come at a cost to taxpayers of hundreds of millions each year and billions over the 45Q tax credit period of eligibility. Air Products announced the LCEC project in 2021, and it had an initial price tag of $4.5 billion. That cost estimate went up after the IRA was passed, and it's now estimated to be a $7 billion project. The increase did not include any change in planned production volumes, but was slated for additional land acquisition and other project improvements that would allow production to ramp up quickly in the face of high anticipated demand. Currently, the facility is slated to be online in 2028. The project plan is to use methane from natural gas to produce about 600,000 metric tons of hydrogen per year, some of which will be converted to ammonia. The system will use autothermal reformer, or ATR technology, with carbon capture equipment incorporated. Air Products says it will capture 95% of the CO2 emissions, which would be about 5 million metric tons of CO2 per year, they say. The plan is to move the captured CO2 via pipeline to the sequestration site under Lake Maurepas, which is about 40 miles away. The project is in final stages of permitting for both the facility construction and the sequestration site development. Storage is planned to be beneath the lake, shown in the photo, in a massive storage complex that could eventually have 9 injection wells and 5 deep monitoring wells in an area about 7.5 miles long by 5.5 miles wide. There has been a significant amount of local opposition to this project, particularly in relation to the CO2 storage plans and pipeline routes. There are a few key components of this analysis. We started with the unabated gray hydrogen carbon intensities we reported in our 2023 blue hydrogen report. Those figures assumed a 20-year global warming potential, GWP, for hydrogen and methane. We assumed a range of upstream methane leakage rates from a low of 1%, which is the default U.S. average used in the GREET model, to 4%, and we include a mid-range estimate of 2.5%. We also analyzed carbon intensity for a range of carbon capture rates from a high of 94.5%, the default value given in GREET, to a low of 60%. The lower values are better reflections of real-world performance of carbon capture systems on an average annual basis. Finally, we included emissions and leakage related to the compression of hydrogen sufficient for offtake via pipeline and leakage en route to a buyer. Since we don't know how much hydrogen will be sold as such and how much converted to ammonia, we assumed half the production would be ammonia and would have no additional emissions after production. In total, we analyzed 12 scenarios to determine the range of carbon intensities of the hydrogen produced at the facility. In this analysis, we also looked at the emissions profile of the project if we assumed a benefit of using the hydrogen in place of fossil fuels for end uses. Since we don't know how the hydrogen will be used or how far it will be transported, we can't calculate precisely the benefit of the LCEC product. To estimate the benefit, though, we turn to the claims from the U.S. Department of Energy about the purported climate benefit of the Hydrogen Hubs program. In that announcement, the DOE stated that there would be a 25 million ton reduction in CO2 as the result of producing and using 3 million tons of hydrogen. representing an average of 8.33 tons CO2e avoided per ton hydrogen used. Unfortunately, the DOE has never publicized the calculations behind the benefits stated, and we also don't know how much of the benefit is from blue hydrogen and how much is from green, so the ratio is likely conservative for blue hydrogen, which would have higher carbon intensities. I won't go through the detailed calculations here. They're fairly straightforward. Starting from the statements made by Air Products about total hydrogen to be produced, we incorporated estimates of the life cycle CO2e emissions for the project, subtracted the CO2 captured, and then subtracted the benefit of using the hydrogen produced. The result is the net emissions benefit of the project for a given scenario. The sample calculations shown on this slide are for the single case out of 12 in which there was a net emissions reduction as a result of the project. The case is the one with the highest assumed CO2 capture rate, 94.5%, and the lowest upstream methane leakage rate, 1%. In the next series of slides, I'll discuss the main findings from this analysis. Our first finding is that while Air Products touts a 95% capture rate for the LCEC project, it's not quite what it seems. The high capture rate really only refers to what's captured from the autothermal reformer, the equipment involved in reforming methane into hydrogen. There's a stack that has higher concentrations of CO2 that result from this stage of processing. Carbon capture equipment is installed to remove it. No other emissions related to the facility operations are included in that 95% capture rate figure. When we calculate the effective capture rate for the project, the figures are 52% or lower and are heavily dependent on assumed methane leakage rates. The effective capture rates shown in this chart are for a well-to-gate life cycle envelope. This includes emissions associated with the production and transport of the natural gas through the production of hydrogen at the facility, including the operation of the carbon capture equipment itself. These figures do not include emissions related to using the hydrogen to make ammonia or any downstream emissions. For the 12 cases included in the analysis, we found the carbon intensities will be very high, much higher than the DOE's clean hydrogen standard. The mid-range estimates based on a 2.5% upstream methane leakage have resulting carbon intensities that are 3 times the clean standard or more. There's no low carbon standard in the US that differs from the clean standard, so Air Products can sell its hydrogen or ammonia domestically as low carbon on the basis of its claim that it's capturing and sequestering a portion of the CO2 from the process. International markets have different criteria for what constitutes low carbon, and it remains to be seen how the product from projects like the LCEC will be able to be competitive in those marketplaces. This chart shows the net emissions profile of the project when we include the downstream emissions benefit of using hydrogen to replace fossil fuels. There's a single case in which there's any net benefit as the result of the LCEC project. It's the case with the highest possible CO2 capture rate and the lowest possible upstream methane leakage rate. And the net benefit is shockingly low, about 200,000 tons CO2e per year. This is about 5% of the annual emissions from an average coal-fired power plant in the US. All other scenarios studied resulted in net new emissions. For the mid-range estimates based on the 2.5% upstream methane leakage rate, we found average annual emissions around 4 million tons CO2e per year. And these would be new emissions generated as a result of this project. Now, we're going to do a quick sidebar on the 45Q tax credit. It's pretty straightforward, but it might be helpful to call out its features before I discuss its significance to the LCEC project. 45Q credits can be claimed for capturing and storing or using CO2. They do not require the demonstration of any emissions reductions, net or otherwise. It's a tax credit, so the claims are based on self-report with some kind of verification from a qualified verifier, such as a petroleum engineer. There are no IRS field agents that go out to examine equipment or read meters. For every ton of carbon oxides, the credit value is $85 if stored, $60 if used, and this could include enhanced oil recovery or enhanced gas recovery, and $180 from direct air capture or DAC. Credits can be claimed for 12 years. They are transferable, and there is a 5-year provision for direct pay. And this makes the credits even more valuable because they can function more like revenue in a company's bottom line. It's key to note that the credit is uncapped. There's no limit on the total amount of money that can be claimed by an individual taxpayer or for all claims combined. And there's a lot of industry interest in accessing 45Q, on the order of hundreds of billions of dollars. So let's jump back to the Air Products case study to see how much in 45Q credits the project could claim. You'll recall that 45Q credits for this project would be based solely on CO2 captured at the production facility and stored. If the sky-high 95% capture rates promised by Air Products are sustained, the company could claim more than $6 billion in credits over 12 years. That's almost the current price tag for the entire facility. But even if carbon capture doesn't go as well as planned, the company would still take in billions through 45Q. Industry is advocating for the extension of 45Q rules in terms of the size of the credits as well as the term over which they can be claimed. If expansions are made to 45Q to subsidize permanent storage at $100 per ton, and the term is extended from 12 to 30 years, the bars on the right show Air Products' windfall could be more than 3 times the estimate under current rules. And all of that comes with no demonstration of a net climate benefit on a full life cycle basis as the result of implementing the project. This summary graphic highlights the magnitude of the blue hydrogen carbon capture boondoggle. Even if carbon capture rates are far lower than companies promise, billions can still be claimed in 45Q credits. Since those credits are awarded without a demonstration the project will result in a net climate benefit, the 45Q program effectively pays for pollution. When upstream and downstream emissions are included, LCEC's effective life cycle capture rate will be significantly lower than 95%. The project will emit substantial amounts of CO2e into the atmosphere every year. In all but one scenario in our analysis, the production of hydrogen from methane at the LCEC will increase, not reduce, CO2e emissions. And that scenario assumes that 95% of the CO2 produced at the LCEC will be captured year in and year out, and that upstream methane leakage rates are just 1%. But at what cost do these minimal emissions reductions come? In the single instance of net emissions reductions, taxpayers will be paying a cost of $2,700 per ton avoided CO2e under the current 45Q rules. And Air Products would receive billions of dollars of subsidies from U.S. taxpayers, regardless of whether the hydrogen and related products produced at the LCEC reduce or increase greenhouse gas emissions. Our analysis highlights the need to examine the net benefits of a project on a life cycle basis. This approach can help clear the fog around claimed capture rates and baseless claims of emissions benefits. It also provides a useful example of how 45Q subsidy program could easily become a CO2 production tax credit, rather than the climate-sparing solution it was framed to be. IEEFA has done a lot of research on CCS around the globe, and you can learn more about that on our website at the link here, and you can also reach out to us directly. Thanks for joining me.